Dublin, Ireland. November 2023. It's the middle of the day. Parents are picking up their children from school. The street is ordinary. The moment is ordinary. Until a man steps forward, pulls out a knife, and begins stabbing 3 small children, a creche worker. The attacker is Riyad Bouchakar, an Algerian national living in Ireland. The children survive, but they will carry that afternoon with them for the rest of their lives. Annecy, France. The 8th of June, 2023. A lakeside playground. Families are out. The sun is shining. A Syrian refugee approaches a group of small children and begins stabbing them. 4 children are wounded. 2 adults who try to intervene are also attacked. The youngest victim is less than 3 years old. A playground. In the middle of a summer morning, Aschaffenburg, Germany. January 2025. A public park. A group of children on an outing. An Afghan asylum seeker walks in and pulls out a knife. A 2-year-old boy is killed on the spot. A man nearby, a stranger, steps in to protect the children. He is killed too. What makes this case particularly striking is what came before it. This attacker's asylum claim had already been rejected. He had been ordered to leave Germany. The system knew he was there. The system did nothing. Munich, Germany, February 2025. An Afghan man deliberately drives his vehicle into a crowd of protesters. A mother and her 2-year-old daughter are struck and killed. Dozens more are seriously injured. Federal prosecutors later confirmed this was not a mental breakdown. This was not a moment of confusion. The motive was religious extremism. Premeditated. Intentional. Villach, Austria. February 2025. Just 2 days after Munich. A Syrian asylum seeker attacks people on the street with a knife. A 14-year-old boy is killed. 5 more people are wounded. 14 years old, walking down a street in a European city, Solingen, Germany, August 2024. A festival. People gathered to celebrate, to enjoy the evening, to simply be together in public. A Syrian man moves through the crowd and begins stabbing. 3 people are killed. 8 more are wounded. The attacker later pledges allegiance to ISIS. A street festival becomes a crime scene. And then there is the case that perhaps shook Europe the most quietly. Mannheim, Germany, May 2024. A pro-democracy rally. A man approaches the crowd and begins stabbing. A police officer, trying to stop the attack, is fatally wounded. He dies days later. The attacker, an Afghan asylum seeker. The victim, a man who showed up to keep the peace. 7 attacks. 7 moments that were supposed to be ordinary. Playgrounds, parks, festivals, protests, streets. The most unguarded places in the world. And in each one, without warning, a knife, a car, a body on the ground, a child who will never forget. There is a question that Europe has been avoiding for years. Not because the answer is complicated, but because the answer is uncomfortable. How did we get here? Between 2015 and 2016, more than 1 million people crossed into Europe in what became known as the migrant crisis. The numbers were staggering. The infrastructure was not ready. The screening processes were overwhelmed. Governments across the continent made a decision, absorb the numbers first, ask the questions later. And for a long time, the political consensus was that asking those questions out loud made you a problem, made you extreme, made you something to be dismissed. But the questions didn't go away, they just accumulated. Because within that movement of people, the vast majority of whom came searching for safety, for work, for a future, there were others. People who did not come to build. People who came with a different purpose entirely. And the systems that were supposed to identify them, to stop them, to remove them when they were identified, those systems failed repeatedly, visibly, fatally. The man in Aschaffenburg had been told to leave. He stayed. The man in Villach was in the system. Nothing happened. The man in Solingen pledged allegiance to ISIS after the attack, but the warning signs were there before it. These are not isolated failures. This is a pattern. A pattern of a continent that built an open door and then forgot to build anything behind it. And the ones paying the price are not the politicians who made those decisions. They are not the officials who closed the files and moved on. The ones paying the price are a 2-year-old boy in a park in Germany, a 14-year-old boy on a street in Austria, a mother and her daughter in Munich, children on a playground in France who went out to play and came home bleeding. This is not about where people come from. This is about what was allowed to happen and why. ISIS did not disappear. That is the first thing to understand. When the territorial caliphate collapsed in Syria and Iraq, when the cities were retaken and the maps changed the world, was told that ISIS had been defeated. And in a narrow geographical sense, that was true. The land was gone, the flags came down, but the ideology went nowhere. It moved. It spread through encrypted channels, through online networks, through communities that existed inside European cities, in apartments in Brussels and Hamburg and Paris and Vienna. It found people who had crossed borders legally and illegally, people who were already radicalized or people who were vulnerable enough to become radicalized once they arrived. And it gave them instructions, simple ones: a knife, a car, a crowd, a playground. You don't need training. You don't need weapons. You need only the willingness, and that willingness, that is what Europe underestimated. Consistently, deliberately, willfully, because acknowledging it meant acknowledging a failure of intelligence, a failure of integration, a failure of the political project that had staked its identity on openness, on tolerance, on the idea that borders were a kind of cruelty, and that everyone who arrived deserved the benefit of the doubt. The children in Annecy did not get the benefit of the doubt. The boy in Aschaffenburg did not get the benefit of the doubt. The police officer in Mannheim who died trying to hold a line, he did not get the benefit of the doubt. What we are watching is not a series of random tragedies. It is a slow, deliberate campaign of terror being waged against the softest possible targets: children, women, people at festivals and markets and parks, people who never imagined that living an ordinary European life had become something that required courage. The fear is the point. The randomness is the point. If nowhere is safe, if a playground, a festival, a protest can become a killing ground, then the fear becomes constant. And constant fear changes people, changes cities, changes countries. That is the goal. And it is working. There are files. That is what nobody tells you. For almost every one of these attackers, there were files. There were records. There were flags in the system, closed asylum cases, deportation orders that were never executed, reports from social workers, alerts from neighbors, notes from caseworkers who wrote something down and then moved on to the next case in the pile. The system was not blind. The system was overwhelmed. And overwhelmed systems make choices, and the choice, again and again, was to leave people in place, to extend, to delay, to avoid the political cost of enforcement, because enforcement is hard. Deportations are contested. Courts intervene. NGOs file challenges. The process can stretch for years, and so the files sit and the people stay. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes, one of those people picks up a knife, and when it happens, the politicians hold press conferences. They express shock. They announce new measures. They promise that this time, things will change, and the files keep growing. What we need to understand is that this is not a problem that arrived from outside. It is a problem that was built from the inside, built through years of political decisions that prioritized optics over outcomes. That treated serious security concerns as inconvenient talking points rather than life and death realities. The women and children who have been attacked across Europe in the last 3 years did not die because of a policy failure that no one could have predicted. They died because of policy failures that many people predicted loudly, clearly, repeatedly, and were told to be quiet. That silence has a cost. We are watching that cost being paid in parks, in playgrounds, in streets that were supposed to be safe, in the faces of children who are old enough to remember but too young to understand why. There is something else happening, something quieter than a knife attack, something that doesn't make the same headlines but that, in the long run, may matter just as much. Statues are being pulled down. Not by governments, by crowds. In cities across Western Europe, monuments that have stood for generations, historical figures, religious symbols, markers of a culture and a civilization, are being torn from their bases. Sometimes it happens at night. Sometimes in broad daylight, with cameras rolling and no one intervening. Churches are being vandalized. In France alone, hundreds of acts of vandalism against Catholic churches are recorded every year. Crosses broken, altars destroyed, artwork defaced. Some of it is written off as petty crime. Some of it is something else entirely. And the people watch. And mostly they say nothing. Not because they don't see it. Not because they don't feel it. But because they have been taught carefully and over many years that saying something makes you dangerous. That naming what you see makes you a bigot. That the instinct to protect what your civilization was built on is something to be ashamed of. So the statues come down, the churches are defaced, the children come home from playgrounds with stab wounds. And the official response is careful and measured and full of words like isolated and complex and we must not generalize. But the people are beginning to generalize, quietly, in conversations that don't happen on social media, in kitchens and at dinner tables, and in the low voices of people who don't want to be overheard. The Europe that people grew up in, the one that felt stable, that felt safe, that felt like it had earned its peace after the horrors of the 20th century, that Europe is becoming something else. And what frightens those who are paying attention is not just what has already happened, it is the suspicion growing stronger every month that this is not the end of something, this is the beginning. And the window to respond, to course correct, to protect what remains, that window is not open forever. The question is not whether Europe will change. It already has. The question is whether the people who live in it will find the courage to say so before the changes become permanent.